All right, welcome back. Today, we are diving headfirst into this crazy, invisible world of radio frequencies that's all around us, all the time. I mean, it is jam-packed with signals for our phones, for radios, for the airplanes flying thousands of feet above our heads. But what happens when the signals that are supposed to stay neatly tucked inside your cable TV line break out? Well, that's when you get a collision course you can't even see, and it has some really surprising consequences. I mean, think about it for a second. It sounds completely nuts, right? How could you, sitting on your couch watching a movie, somehow cause a problem for a pilot way up in the sky? Well, it all comes down to how our cable networks are built and, more importantly, what happens when they start to break down. So I want you to picture the cable coming into your house as this perfectly sealed pipe. Its whole job is to be a private highway just for data. It carries this enormous amount of information. We're talking hundreds of TV channels, your super fast internet, and it keeps it completely shielded and separate from the outside world. Now, because that pipe is a closed system, it lets operators do something really clever. It's called frequency reuse. They can pack that cable with frequencies that are already being used out in the open air for totally different things, like, say, aeronautical navigation or cell signals. It's kind of like having two separate conversations in the same room, but one of them is happening inside a totally soundproof box. And as long as that box stays sealed, no problem. But what happens when that soundproof box, that pipe, springs a leak? That is what the industry calls signal leakage, or egress. Any little crack, a loose connector, any damage at all to the cable shield, and those internal signals can just spill out into the airwaves. And that, right there, is where all the trouble starts. And when these signals do get out, the first, and honestly, the most critical danger zone is way up in the sky. This is a problem the industry has been dealing with for a very long time. And look, we are not just talking about a little bit of static on the radio here. These leaking signals can actually be powerful enough to disrupt a pilot's ability to talk to the ground and even navigate the plane. This is exactly why it's a top-tier, highest-level concern for the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. So the specific frequencies we're worried about here are in what are called the VHF and UHF bands. These are radio channels reserved exclusively for aviation. Cable operators are actually required by law to constantly scan their networks for any leaks in these specific ranges, all to prevent what could be a potential disaster.
But the story doesn't stop with airplanes. A whole new battle for the airwaves has popped up. And this one hits a lot closer to home for pretty much all of us.
You see, the whole problem has kind of shifted. For years, the main worry was about leaks in those lower VHF frequencies messing with airplanes. But as our technology has changed, the problem has moved up the radio dial into the higher UHF frequencies. And guess what else lives there? Yep, our 4G and LTE mobile devices. And this is what makes it so tricky, all thanks to a little quirk of physics. Technicians found out that a cable network could look perfectly clean in those lower aviation frequencies, but at the same time, be leaking like a sieve in the higher LTE bands. So just fixing one doesn't guarantee the other is safe. So here's where things get tangled up. The frequencies that our phones use for 4G and LTE, the very backbone of our mobile internet, directly overlap with channels being used inside a lot of cable networks. So when a signal from, say, a digital cable channel escapes, it can basically create a wall of noise that just jams the connection from your phone to the cell tower. So, what does this actually mean for you personally? Well, have you ever had just awful cell service in one specific spot for no reason? It's entirely possible that the source of your frustration isn't your cell carrier at all, but a signal leak coming from a damaged cable line right nearby. Now, aviation and cell phones, those are the two big ones, but they are not the only services out there that can be affected when these cable signals go rogue. So who else is out there trying to use these airwaves? Well, you've got first responders, police, fire departments, who often rely on radio frequencies that can get hit by this stuff. Then you have the hobbyists, everything from amateur ham radio operators to people who just love listening to the airwaves with a scanner. For them, cable leakage just sounds like this loud, buzzing interference that totally drowns out what they're trying to listen to. In fact, here is a perfect real-world example. The video signal for cable TV's channel 18 sits on the exact same frequency, 145.250 megahertz, that is super common for ham radio operators to use for their repeaters. So one tiny little leak
can cause massive headaches for an entire community of radio hobbyists. And it's so important to remember this isn't some abstract digital thing happening in the ether. Signal leakage comes from actual physical damage. A compromised cable, just like this one you see here, literally becomes a gaping hole for those signals to just pour out of.
And the causes? Oh man, they are everywhere. It could be a connector that a technician just never tightened down properly. It could be a squirrel who decided your cable line looked like a tasty snack. It might be slow corrosion over years, a sudden lightning strike, or even that cheap, poorly made splitter you bought online. The leak could literally be starting from inside your own house. So, how in the world do cable operators manage all this invisible chaos? Well, it turns out they have a really powerful reason to keep their network sealed up tight. And it's not just about keeping signals from getting out. Because here's the deal, it's a two-way street. We've been talking all about egress, that's signals leaking out. But any hole that lets signals out can also let signals in, and that's called ingress. Those outside signals can absolutely wreck your cable service, causing all that annoying pixelation on your TV and bringing your internet to a crawl. So, to prevent both of these problems, the FCC has some really strict rules in place. Operators have to proactively drive around and scan their entire network, every single mile of it, multiple times a year. They have to log every significant leak they find and then fix it, and that responsibility follows the wire all the way to the back of your television set. Which kind of leaves us with this one big question. The airwaves, the radio frequency spectrum, it's not getting any bigger. But our demand for it, it is absolutely exploding. So keeping all of these vital signals in their own proper lanes, from your 4K Netflix stream to a pilot's radio, is this constant, invisible challenge that's only getting more and more complicated.